Hi, this is my Vblog Idle Thoughts, where I explore thoughts, philosophy, and worldviews of modern day, and how it relates to some of the stuff that happened in the past. Today, I am going to talk a bit about words and meanings. Where to begin? So, anthropologically speaking, it is children who form language. The generation that comes after me, at least I think 2 cycles down, came up with the word yeet and yoked. For my millennial, which sounds cosmic in a way, understanding, yeet is to take something and move it from point A to point B, normally in the form of throwing, to yeet. Yoked is the past tense word for that. Now, not only is this word fun to say, which is why it became a meme and joined the colloquial lexicon that we all share communally. Okay, I gotta keep the word small. Sorry. It's the kids that make our words. My dad's words were bling. Does anyone use bling anymore? In my grandmother's day, it was ain't. And as she would say, rather stoically, mind you, hypocritically, ain't a word. Right. I forget exactly the study. South Portugal? Brazil? So, they did this study where they had all these deaf kids, right? Deaf as in they can't hear. And they put them in a colony together. And they gave them the basics of sign language. I don't know any sign language other than the insulting kind. Insulting for Japan. Insulting for Australia. Insulting for America. For America! Yeah. So this group of deaf kids had the basic rudimentaries of hand signals. And from that, they grew the communication with hands into, essentially sign language. And in every successive generation, they came up with things to make communication easier. I am not a linguist. So I cannot tell you exactly what was done. Perhaps punctuation, adjectives. Yeah, I failed the English comp 7 times. I don't know what these words mean. I'm sorry. I mean, pronouns is probably something related to a protagonist. I'm sorry, okay? I am not an English major. I can't even talk right, much less spell things correctly. I'm sorry. Anthropologically, it is the next generation that creates words. And in the same vein as liberals create the new conservatives, the young create the new old. Someday these children will be the ones who rule, the ones who make decisions, and the ones who run things. Such is the way with boomers, who have yet to die out. And somehow they're still in charge. I guess arrogance goes a long way. Still, there is a form of control that happens. Earlier I brought up ain't a word. In England, I don't know how deep it goes, but they standardize their language. And there's various different articulations that go on and different accents almost by street basis. Interesting, to be sure. But there's still a standard on the language. It takes a lot for a word to become accepted by status quo, the mainstream. Well, the mainstream can use it, but that doesn't mean the status quo will. I mean, we have boomers who are senators that don't know what texting is. Oh boy, they make our laws. Sorry, the hardest part about these vlogs is to talk continuously, but this is a free-form format. Free-form format. And it's designed to get stuff out there. To be free-form, as much as it can be. To get honest and open thoughts on a thing, rather than having a refined, set-up thing which is fully thought out. Now, this is a brainstorming thing. It's a vlog. No one watches this stuff. So word control. It's a thing. There was such a hard kickback of ain't is not a word. That sentence is very authoritative, fascist. It's very fascist. I can't even say the word. I hate this. Word lock. Word Nazis. Grammar Nazis. Actually, that's another form of word control. It has to be spelled like so. It cannot be something else. You get the idea. It's there, as opposed to there. Or they are. Right? It has to be spelled a specific way. And I get that. But it also stops a lot of change, evolution. I guess that's why emojis are limiting in their own right. So when you control someone's language, when you control what words people can use, you can control their line of thought, right? In 1984, George Orwell wrote about a concept called newspeak, controlling the words, the very words that people use, and what they mean. So there cannot be a word for peace, because there's no word for war, as defined as not peace, the thing America is eternally at. As a quick little side, how come we don't have a term for not crime? We have crime, but we don't have that opposite. We don't have a yin to a yang to my yin. We don't have that duality. We just assume there's nothing. And then there's criminal. It's actually said with a lot of force. America's all about that force. Criminal. Terrorist. Police. America. Sorry, the American guy. Excited. I shout. We're American. We do things. We interrupt conversations. Sorry that we are so boorish. Regardless, you see how true the concept of newspeak and controlling people's thoughts are when you go into, and this is a little microcosm of an example here. Look at the community of incels, right? They look at guys as genetically superior, and they refer to them as chads. A word normally associated with, the popular, well-to-do, good-looking guy that gets all the girls and bangs your dad, your daughter, your neighbor, and the dog, too. That is the idea, the concept. It is labeled in a box. Now, with these incels, the more you learn, the more of their definitions in dictionary or lexicon, the more sucked into their matrix, their limiting viewpoint you get. They are controlled by their words. Their actions are dictated by how they think. And yes, there is an emotional loophole that they go on there for confirmation, because it's the only confirmation they'll ever get. Even though it's negative, they go back for reconfirmation. They feel shitty. They go back for reconfirmation. They feel shitty. It's a Ouroboros of bad things. And you wonder why these guys commit suicide. They're trapped, stuck in their own linguistical matrix. Now, perhaps I am not communist or a comrade, because I am not steeped in the philosophy, Marxism, the lore, My words are not formulated by their concepts, their ideas. They're stuck in my head. But then again, I'm not Republican either. I don't have the dog whistle or labeled concept such as taxation is theft. I see it. After an hour's discussion with a friendly Republican who was tolerant enough to explain it to me, instead of going, oh, you Democrat, how dare you, blah, 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 blah. You want slavery, don't you? It's like you can't talk to people anymore. You can't discuss things. There is no back and forth. Right? You can't equate things within reason because there's so much emotional buildup behind these little ideas that they are so wrapped around arguing. There are Republicans and Democrats on both sides that don't want guns, and yet there are Republicans and Democrats on both sides that do want guns. Why are you fighting over the label of which party you're in? Pain, anguish, these are the feelings I feel. So the status quo, or I'm going to call it corporate, because such word needs contempt. Corporate tries to do these things where they control the language. And it sterilizes things. It makes things inhuman. I mean, have you ever read a business letter? It's so two-sided, so many layers to it, that it is mind-meltingly inaccurate, wrong, misleading. It is a lie. Back in World War I believe, they had a thing called shell shock, right? And then World War II happened, and they tried changing it to something else for a little while. And the doctors were like, nope. Because when you hear shell shock, it hits you. No pun intended. It hits you and you understand, you get the idea. You know what that is. And you can treat it. When we went to Vietnam, I don't know what accent that is. We went to war in South Korea? Southern Vietnam. They renamed shell shock again. And this time, they had a very hard hammer blow to it. So, it could not, they'd squash anyone who tried calling shell shock. And a lot of people died because of it. Now the term has been finalized as post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD for short. And for a long time, it was viewed that soldiers with PTSD, it's a personal failing. Much like how millennials aren't making money because of economics. It's a personal failing. When that is not the case. I don't know why it had to be relabeled so many times, why so many people had to suffer and die for the sake of renaming a label when shell shock did just fine. It was human, makes sense. You hear it today and it still hits. It still makes sense. It still is traction. That's perhaps my biggest grievance with word reacquisition, right? I have no stake or claim to the word queer. The LGBT community has reclaimed queer as opposed to meaning weird, meaning gay, and gay meaning not happy, but two people who love each other very much of the same sexual bodily functions. There's probably a better definition out there. It's not my bag. I'm sorry, I do not represent you. I'm talking about you. Don't at me, bro. But if you want, educate me. I wouldn't mind knowing the difference. We still see corporate doing this thing of renaming things into something else, something different. For example, back in the day of the grand year of 1998, there used to be a term called Doom clone in the video game industry, because Doom was one of the first shooter games out there. You had a gun, you ran around, you shot demons from hell. I mean, there should be nothing more Catholic. But video games are the devil, I guess. Whatever. So, they took Doom Clone, and in the early 2000s, when Call of Duty came out, they rebranded it. They went through, I think, 3 different rebrandings. I don't remember what they were, I just remember they existed. And eventually it was sold on first-person shooter. And the way Call of Duty went, till today, there are whole groups of people who identify themselves as gamers that only play first-person shooters. Twitch shooters, I think that's a sub-demographic in this general matrix of listings. Just as there's only sports players. So I met a guy who only played EA Sports Madden, and he'd buy every new station that came out so he could play an updated roster game of every year, even though they don't change the graphics, even though he'd lose his saves, even though he spent a lot of money to do this. Cool. Not my bag. The point remains, is Doom Clone was grabbed and reworked and shuffled into something that doesn't sound human. First-person shooter. As opposed to Doom Clone, which has a feel and weight to it. I mean, why do you think the term Thor has been around for so long? Why do you think the word Zeus is said like Zeus? You know, like, there's a reason why in G.I. Joe you got, I don't know if anyone in G.I. Joe is actually named Joe. But the main guy, the good-looking white leadership dude, his name's Duke. Which later became a parody known as Duke Nukem, because you can't say Duke without that k, that inflection, without having a sort of association of badassity, you know. I think another good example is the term Alucard, or Dracula, because of how media has begun to portray it. The Hellsing Ultimate series really hammered home the idea that the word Alucard is cool. It's awesome. We should be named like that guy. You know. Words are made up. All words are made up. But all words have origins. They have meanings. If you just make up some inhuman term of phrase, beep bop boop, I'm a robot, I do not understand human needs and compassion. Perhaps I have too much of poor man disdain or enmity towards corporate, the inconsiderate redesign of human systems and values. I hate it. It builds up this false empire of man, where man is God, and you must worship him for money. Oh, we don't want this guy to go over here, because then we can't have his money. He won't do business with us. Or the idea of, geez, what was that socialist example it was? Sorry, I know you guys came here for words, but let me just run through this real quick. So, it is said for business that you vote with your dollars. So you can have 2,000 people in one town that don't want to shop at a Sitco, right? Sitco coffee. But you get two guys who have, tons and tons and tons of money. Well, then those 2,000 people don't matter. Just those two. There are whole companies based on actually, like, and this is crazy to me, setting up catering and food, right, for rich kids that think that's the only way you eat. They can't go out for a Big Mac or Taco Bell, right? And these companies only serve like one kid, one guy. And that's crazy to me. But going back to words, what brought about all of this talk of words, meanings, definitions? I heard about someone trying to recalibrate the meaning of Metrovania, right? This idea of, in a video game, you go forward in a video game and you are stopped from going in various directions until you find the skills, the MacGuffins, the tools, the items. You acquire a thing. Whether that's self-confidence or love of your fellow man, it doesn't matter. You are gate blocked until you get that thing and progress further. That's what Metrovania is, based off of Metroid, which is then again based off Metro Android, right? And Castlevania, based off of Castle, because there's a Dracula in the castle. It's like in the name, it's so important. And Transylvania, which is the location of Vlad the Impaler, later to be known as Dracul, or Dracula. I'm sure you're aware of the vampire legend. And so they grabbed these two like games and combined them to make a word. And there's a history and foundation to all of that. Yet people are upset about the term because it's, I don't know, too human,
and it needs to be changed into something else. They're trying to change the zeitgeist, the group consciousness on the topic. My initial question is why? Why do you feel so strongly about it? Why does it matter? 2. No one really benefits that unless you're trying to manipulate or control the label, thus control a group. You know, back in the day, in the music industry, there was a thing called nu metal, and that's NU metal. It was heavy metal music or rock music that was politically angled towards talking about change and bringing new ideas to the forefront. But you couldn't do that under the brand, like alternative or Jesus metal or whatever. But you need that label to work with, that foundational go-to guy, that leader in the group who you can gather around, the maypole of consolidated ideas, like Republican. There's no such thing as a Democrat. They're too out of touch with their own party. It's Republican diet. So Republican, feminism, LGBT community, these are maypoles of ideas. Like you mentioned this thing and people know what you're talking about. They gather around it because they want to talk about it. Words matter. Labels and ideas matter. People who stand up for ideas matter. And I'm noticing in this corporate world today, we don't have any leaders. We don't have people that stand up for ideas. And it's going to get us conquered. And for a lot of us, it's going to get us killed. So, that is my thoughts on wordsmithing, maypole of ideas. Leave your thoughts and comments below. Like and subscribe. My name is Damien Bishop, and this is my vblog called Idle Thoughts. And why does this matter? If you stand up for an idea, and you should stand up for something. I do, because I am.